Today on the 50-pound brain, we're working on Higgins. It's a beautiful day and we busted him out of his shelter. I've got the windshield off and it's in the shop, and I'll show you what we're doing. I've decided to address the screws that were sticking out in the seal track. I got a couple different ways to deal with that, and we're gonna look at both solutions and see which one will be best. But first we've got to get that bottom rail off of the windshield. So let's do that. I already removed the stanchions and I removed the screws that are on the sides. And so we're going to get this whole rail off with those little L brackets that we need to modify. Or one of the options is to modify those. We don't want to bust the glass. That's number one. Slowly coming. Seal. So here's what we're doing. We're turning the faces down on these screws so that we're taking the height off, and hopefully still maintaining a little bit of the hex drive in it. But that's our big problem. I thought that maybe countersinking the L brackets would be a viable option, but we're not. We're bottoming out on that frame rail before we bottom out on the L bracket. So we just got to take the head, make the head height lower. So that's what we're doing. Okay, I need to do that 7 more times. So one of the other things I did is I did chamfer these holes a little bit. Here's one I haven't done yet. Here's the original bracket as it comes from Moss Motors, and it's just squared off and tapped. So I chamfered all the brass screw holes, just give them a little bit more countersink to them in case they are bottoming out, but it didn't look like they were. And look how skanky these brackets are already, and they haven't even been in the rain. So these are some very prone to corrosion steel brackets, and so that's why I had to trash the other ones, because the little screws were steel and the brackets, the OEM brackets, were steel, and I'm sure they did the exact same thing. Turned into a little brown coral reef in the corners of my windshield. So Not much I can do about it, but I can put in the anti-seize, and hopefully if this thing has to come, that plus the just using brass screws. And the big screw that goes in this hole is stainless. That's the one that goes through the stanchion into this, and it's stainless. So those three on each side came out just fine. I hope you can see that they're way more flush than they were before, so I'm hoping that the seal will go in better now. Actually, it wouldn't at all. They were sticking up probably, I don't know, 32nd of an inch before. So it looks good. And here's the test of our success. I've run the seal past the screw heads. They're in where these cutouts are, and it slid by pretty quick. Now I will say I've got this thing hosed down with some cheap olive oil to encourage this thing to slide in, because it's got to go all the way down there in one piece. So this thing's going to be totally hosed in it. But I chose olive oil because I'm assuming that this is some kind of cheap vinyl, and I didn't want a petroleum-based oil or lubricant to break down the seal. So let's get after it. We're going to put the frame together and then slide this seal in. Okay, let the wrestling begin. Could have been mounted on the windshield, because it at least have something to hold the rail, but I don't even have that. So it is what it is. Oh, well, it came out of the slot. I was afraid I tore the seal. Okay. All right, and it can do that at the screw hole cutouts because it is wider, so it's not a super big deal. But then it just becomes a little bit of a derailer for the seal once it does that. Let me change camera angles. And make sure both sides of the thing are going in, and they are. Now it's starting to stretch. Now I caught a big glob of the anti-seize that I put on the screws before I put the bracket screws in. Smells like Italian restaurant here. He's very nice. There we have it. It is super slimy. Now, unfortunately, we've got to pound this into place on this. You remember from the last video how fun that was. So I don't understand. I'd love to see how they assembled some of this stuff at the factory, because I don't want to beat on this thing and wreck this seal. I'm going to hose this with olive oil as well onto our glazing and see how it goes. Now, before I trim off this excess, just know that in the stanchions there is a relief for a piece of this seal to stick into it. So I need to slide this thing down some more, and then I can cut this one long. So just be aware of that before you go and install that seal and cut it. It needs to be a little bit long on both ends. One thing we do have to do is we have to trim the T part of the seal off, because it's interfering with us getting the bottom rail on, because it's getting caught in this slot for the top windshield seal. But don't leave this overhang. Go. Having a second set of hands would be awesome. So I gotta get a bit more. Draw this together. I don't want to tear the threads out. I don't know that I'm doing anything. Yeah, I don't want to wreck this screw. Okay, I don't know if that's going to work. I was hoping it would. Okay, the next option is ratchet strap. That drawn up enough to close that gap. Do our Loctite, even though, or I mean, anti-seize, even though they're brass. Here we go. Try not to wreck the hex on it. And here's our last one. Yay. We're done. I can put the stanchions back on and put this back on Higgins. I don't know if you can see it, but this big streak of olive oil, whenever I just glance at the glass, I thought I had broken it. So let's get the glass cleaned up first, and then we'll get stanchions on it. All right, so I was wrong about the overhang, because I didn't take into account this, how much inset this thing has. So we actually need to chop this off quite a bit. Probably about right there at an angle. we'll see. So sorry for steering you wrong. So in here, there's these two holes. There's a little, I don't know, it's probably about the size of a quarter with the two screw holes in it, and it's just a tab to hold that mess in there like that. I think they really, oh, see, I don't know if you can see this gap right here. I should have cut like this way, hold that down, so that's gonna leak. But seeing as how we aren't gonna have a top on it, and it's gonna be a fair weather car, it's not a very big deal, but just be mindful of that when you go to install this seal. And yeah, I should cut from here this way. All right, let me go do up the other side and get these stanchions on. Then we'll be ready to put them back on Higgins. Another thing to know is if you're using Repro, I don't know what these are actually called, but they're basically wind deflectors. These won't always sit real nice in here because this is a radiused machined surface and this is a sharp corner. So it's gonna wanna pop up on you and it's gonna wanna do that. So I'm gonna go grind off the corner off this little edge here. There we go, that fits real nice now. It'll pull down tight, not have any tension in there when we tighten these screws down. Well, there it is. And as you can see, the seal's sticking up. And I'm standing next to a racetrack. So I don't know if I put this on backwards. Maybe I did. That kind of sucks. I'm hoping it'll relax over time. There is no directions or anything like that. So we'll see. When we're doing 100 miles an hour, the air will push it down. I do know that. So windshield looks good, except for the seal doesn't touch the cowl. So when you don't get what you want, you get experience. So we got some experience on this windshield. So as you can see, looking like rain. It's gonna be cold for the next week, so Higgins is gonna go back in his room. But next up, USB charger somewhere on the dash or around the dash. Bring him up to the 21st century. So I got my haircut and beard trimmed today by JC at Supercuts and Antelope Drive in Layton. Always recommend her if you want a good haircut. So, till next time, thanks for watching.